people are not persuaded very often by what other people think. They are persuaded by what experiences people have had.
Sue, I wonder if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and the pamphlet that just recently came out.
Ah,
Haha,
this is the pamphlet, and I like the gold cover, I must say.
I do too.
Okay, my name is Sue Williams. In Quaker terms, I've been a Quaker my whole adult life. I'm currently a member of Roanoke, Virginia meeting. Was 25 years a member of Ireland Yearly meeting. In university and graduate school, I worked in French and other languages and politics, particularly political theory. And in some ways, those became useful in the work I did later. I taught in several universities, but in 1979 or thereabouts, here in Roanoke, I met Steve, who we ended up marrying each other and deciding that as part of the clearness committee for getting married, if it made sense to get married, it should mean that we would do things we might not have done alone. So pretty quickly, we quit our jobs. I was working for a newspaper here in Roanoke. Steve was an earthy kind of person, and he was working at the sewage treatment plant. He was a biochemist, and that was what he was doing. And we left those jobs and became volunteers, working with street children in Haiti, and then with refugees in Botswana. Then we got one of the more interesting job descriptions you can get, I think. Quaker Peace and Service, which was British and Irish Quakers collectively having a development agency, kind of like AFSC. The head of it came to us one day and he said, "We think there's a war on in Uganda. We want you to go and see what you can do." And we kind of looked at each other and we said, okay, so that's what we did. And then we spent about 3 years in Uganda in the middle of a civil war and went on from there to other countries where we did other kinds of work like that. So most of my recent career has been in peacemaking, reconciliation, political mediation. By political mediation, meaning that very often in conflicts, particularly violent conflicts, people don't really want to listen to or talk to anybody but everybody who agrees with them completely. They don't want to know what anybody else thinks, and they don't care whether those people know what they think. So we pretty quickly concluded that our role would be to try to complete what we saw as a broken circle of communication by being in touch with all of the parties in a conflict and going around among them, offering to explain what we had heard from all the others, essentially, which is useful at the early stages of a peace process. And sometimes when it has broken down, those are the times that it's most useful. So we worked in a number of countries, and one of the things I found is that in the work, as well as in my teaching, I always told a lot of stories, because I think that ideas about politics or about change are more vivid if they come with the human story. And so I always told a lot of stories. Well, many years later, when I retired, I ended up writing down some of the stories, and that's what the pamphlet is. It's things, in this case, this pamphlet is about things that people said to me that struck me, that were really kind of surprising and gave me pause. And I just sort of stopped and wanted to pursue it and find out more, because there was a lot to learn in the things that people said to me. So that's the title of The World in a Sentence. In a way, it's their world in a sentence, maybe. One of the life sentence prisoners I worked with in Northern Ireland said to me one day, "You're the only person I talk to who doesn't agree with me, but doesn't want me dead." Which is an opening line for an interesting conversation. And I knew him for, I guess, about 15 years. And we talked from time to time, and it was always interesting to talk to him. So those are some of the kinds of things that come out in the pamphlet. I also write to reflect on my own life, and that's also true to some extent about the pamphlet. In more recent years, particularly trying to understand and to some extent mitigate the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder, which hasn't been a major problem for me, but it crops up every now and then. And I've finally begun to understand how I deal with it. It takes a while. So those are all reasons for doing that. I've worked with some amazing people, some really extraordinary and inspiring people in very difficult circumstances. And many of them are dead. And that's hard. That's always hard. Because very often societies kill the very people they need the most. In several of the societies we worked in, the people, the middle kind of people who could bring who could bring stability to a society were the very ones who were killed. And it's, I suppose it's kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that people go through when they want to be sure nobody can replace them. They try to do away with all those people, anybody with any degree of leadership, really. One of the things that we learned by doing political mediation was what are some of the things that cause people to be hesitant about in situations like right now in between Israel and Palestine. Pretty uniformly, people in a serious conflict don't want to enter a peace process unless they have some belief that there will be a solution that they like, that's acceptable to them. And they usually don't believe that. Another thing they want to be sure of is that their concerns will be dealt with. So if your concern is security, but my concern is justice for my people, I want to know for sure that we won't just meet until you get your needs met, that we'll continue to meet until my needs get met. And it's very hard to believe that that's going to happen. In a funny way, one of the things that helps, I think, sometimes is either writing or art or theater, in some interesting places, theater, some way for different groups of people to convey something about what they believe and what they experience in a way that other people can believe it. Oddly, in some societies, one of the things that works is surveys. Very often, if you do a survey in a country that's more or less at war, you'll find that a substantial proportion of every group wants a lot of the same things. And often they see possibilities that appeal to all of them. So that's part of what this is about, even the storytelling and the random writing. I think one of the most interesting things to me that we discovered, and I think lots of other people have discovered it too, but was the importance of what we call behavioral mediation. When people are not prepared to talk to each other, they may nonetheless be willing to demonstrate that they can act, that they can do things, and that they have somebody has a degree of control over what their troops do if they're an armed group. Somebody makes decisions, and they can demonstrate that there's a future that they could be a part of if they get the chance. Before they're, they will say, I don't want to talk to those people. I don't want to give them any legitimacy. I don't care. But in, well, a couple of places that we worked with, the armed rebel groups would say, well, civilians are really bearing the brunt of this. We could stop attacking soldiers at night if they would confine themselves to the barracks and not attack us. And sometimes that kind of thing is the first step toward beginning to believe that the others can do that for you.
So it sounds like there was a journey of healing almost for you in writing out these narrative pieces, humanizing all of these different people and walks of life in your pamphlet. I wonder if there is something that you would like your readers to take away after reading this too.
I think the main thing I would like them to take away, I think that is true, what you've said, but it wouldn't be worth publishing if it's just about my journey. I think that the thing that is most important to me is that all of these people are worthy of respect. They're worthy of being listened to and learned from. They have capacities that they can share with others if they get the chance. And often they're just dismissed and ignored and overlooked. And it's not always racism, and it's not always, prejudice of any kind. It's just we keep moving in our lives, and we most often look for people who seem to us to be like us. And I think that makes it difficult. I find when I read these stories to people, very often people say to me, but why did you go after that person? Why? I mean, okay, so he said that, but why didn't you walk away? And I just think you can't. I mean, these are interesting people. They have lessons to teach us. They have lessons to learn from us. And I think if I hope people will take something away from it, it would be the humanity of all these different people, and therefore their worthiness of respect and of having their gifts honored to some extent. Yeah.
What is it like having written this and having it published now? Are you excited to have people read these stories? Are you thinking of what else to write down? How are you feeling after this has gotten in people's mailboxes?
I am not yet figuring out what to write next. Something will smack me in the head one day and I'll begin again. As you know, I wrote an earlier Pendle Hill pamphlet, and it's been a couple of years since I did that. So I am glad to have it published. The part of it is just relief, which I'm sure you feel too. Any organization publishing something that gets to the point where you think, maybe that part of it is done at least. No, I'm glad to have it published. I'm interested in people's responses. I've read some of the stories to some groups of people, and I'm always happy to hear what people have to say and how they react and what they think. Because I recognize that I've led a life that not many people live. I've worked in 60 or more countries and really met some of the most inspiring people I ever hoped to meet. So, and worked alongside them. So it would be it's nice to be able to try to share that a bit with people, but it's a little hard to make the bridges between that experience and their experience, no matter what their experience is,
So if you tell everything through a narrative, it's kind of more accessible as well. The storytelling of it, yeah.
I think that's true. I think partly because it corresponds more closely. What I see in dialogue programs, for example, is that people are not persuaded very often by what other people think. They are persuaded by what experiences people have had. And they want to know, how did you come to, I mean, I don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, but what have you experienced in your life and what have you learned from it? And what do I need to know from it is more that kind of thing. So I think storytelling helps in that respect. There's also a wonderful line that says, one of the problems with trauma is that it destroys narrative. When you're living through a really traumatic situation, time is fractured. There's no tomorrow, there's no yesterday, there's no this, then that. It's just chaos and everything happening at once. So telling stories, I suppose, reestablishes narrative for me and possibly for other people as well. Certainly, when I'm working with people in other countries and I'm bringing them an experience from another place, the narrative is one way of building that bridge that makes, I'm not trying to tell them what to do, but I'm offering them some possibilities other people have used in other places. And what makes that possibly useful is for them to understand it is an experience. I have experience, it's different. The way I would use this experience is not the same way they used it, but it might still offer us an alternative, an option, a possibility. And I think that's what I like about it. I suppose if I could paint it or draw it, I might do that, but I can't. So I do very bad paintings, but I don't do them for public use.
Well, you write very wonderful pamphlets, so we'll take that. Well, I really enjoyed reading your pamphlet, and I'm excited for other people to read theirs too. And I wonder if there's anything else that you wanted to like share or say that maybe you didn't get a chance to in your pamphlet while we have the moment.
You don't want to give me that big an opening. I could say anything. One personal thing I would say is when I look again at the pamphlet, I realize my husband Steve died about 15 years ago, and his voice is missing, but he was there for a lot of those experiences. So in some ways, I recognize that that half of one voice is missing there. He would have had different things to say, and it would have been nice to have them. He and I wrote our book, Being in the Middle by Being at the Edge, partly at Pendle Hill. We were at Pendle Hill for about 6 weeks. And it was a really interesting experience. If you were at a writer's project, you might be interested in this. We expected it to be difficult to write together because we had very different writing styles. And we decided to begin just by making a list of some of the topics we thought we would talk about, talking about Quaker political mediation. So we generated a list of topics, and we each took one and started on it. And then when we got to a certain point, we just exchanged. So I would take the one he'd been writing on and I would work on it. And then we'd exchange back again. And I think I at least was beginning to think we may just have to do alternating chapters or something. And to our surprise, what ended up happening is that each piece that we worked on eventually came full circle in some way, such that because it went through both of us and both of our different styles, it somehow ended up being a circle. And it gave me a lot of faith in that process of doing that it didn't have to be, our voices were different, but they didn't have to be adversaries. They didn't have to be opposed, that there was a way in which we completed each other. So I sort of missed him in this pamphlet, but he's there somewhere.
Certainly. And you're here too, which is what matters in the pamphlet.
Well, that's nice too, for the moment at least.
Well, this again was a joy to read. I can't wait for other folks to read it. And really, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and thanks a lot for helping me with this.